Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Crimson Chronicles podcast. I'm Rick Morton, along with my co-host, Tommy Ford. We are continuing to take a walk down memory lane in Crimson Tide history. We're looking this season at basketball. We're spending time talking about the Crimson Tide basketball program, and today we have one of the all-time greats, only one of our great players, but one of our great coaches. Coach Mark Gottfried is with us. He, of course, was longtime coach of the Crimson Tide. He is, as we heard in our previous episode with him, still the single season percentage leader in 3-pointers, and so he's still daring somebody to take that record. But tonight we're going to jump in with him, and we're going to talk a little bit about after graduation exploits as a coach. And so, Coach, welcome. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
After you graduated from the university in 1987, you made a decision to continue your basketball playing career with Athletes in Action. Coach, what was the reason behind that?
You know, I had gotten drafted by Detroit, the Pistons. They were back in the bad boy era, back with Isaiah Thomas and Lambeer. And I'd gone up to Detroit, and I hung in there for a while. And when I got cut, I had some opportunities to go overseas and play like a lot of players do. But I had made a decision. I wanted to play 1 year. Athletes in Action's a Christian-based basketball team and traveled all around the country, all around the world. And I'm so glad I did. I met some great friends who are still friends to this day. And it was such a good opportunity as a young adult for me, coming out of college, you're on your own and, being surrounded by, some like-minded people that really kind of helped me kind of solidify where I was with my faith. So I really loved playing with them. And, to this day, I'm still close with a lot of the guys I played with that year.
You actually went back and coached a little bit for Athletes in Action in a tour of Poland back in 1989?
Yeah, they asked me to coach a team, which was great for me, kind of get my feet wet a little bit. I had a bunch of college players, and I was pretty young at the time, but it was a lot of fun. And I always knew that I wanted to coach. We talked about in the other episode, my father, being in athletics as a coach and athletic director. And then my Uncle Mike was a football coach. And so it was kind of in there that's what I wanted to do. But I think that opportunity I had to even coach, with Athletes in Action probably got me more excited about it as well. And, I had just such a wonderful opportunity then that kind of arose out of all that to start coaching at UCLA of all places, and couldn't have asked for anything better as far as for a young coach getting your feet wet in the coaching business.
Mark, one more question about Athletes in Action. You guys, for folks that are not familiar with that team, you guys played some of the best competition from around the country and around the world as part of that touring effort. What are some of the memories that you have of maybe people that you played or things that happened along the way while you were playing for?
A lot of people, they don't remember this, but, years and years ago, college basketball teams could play 2 exhibition games, and they had to be against teams. And then people might remember, like Marathon Oil had a team, and I can't even remember the names of the different type teams. But it was great for Athletes in Action because we were able to go in and we played every night. I mean, I think we played like out of 28 straight nights, we might have had 26 games. I mean, we just played every day, and we'd play and get up the next morning and, geographically get to the next team. And we had a good team. We had 2 or 3 former NBA players they're pretty solid guys that had gotten cut that came to play with us, really good college players. I think we started off 14-0. And, you're playing, we start on the West Coast, and we started off with a couple maybe non-Division I teams like Westmont College or some of those, but then it was UCLA, USC, Cal. Matter of fact, we actually played Cal on a Friday night in the Bay Area, and we had a Saturday night game at Clemson. How about that one? We went from Cal, and we took a red eye, flew across the country. We missed our flight, our connection in Atlanta, got to Clemson about 3 p.m. and beat them and beat Clemson the next night. But, you're just playing every single night. And the beauty of that team was the guys on the team, and it was the times, on the bus, on the airplane, the conversations you're having with these guys that, all shared, their faith together. It was a great kind of a foundation for me as, going from college into being an adult. So I loved it, but we played every night, and we had a great team. And then we went to South America. Then we went into China. We were traveling all over the world. So it was a phenomenal experience.
Well, Mark, let's talk about your time at UCLA. 1988 to 95, I believe. It had to have been special for you in so many ways. 2 seasons as a GA, then several years as a full-time assistant under, as you mentioned, Jim Herrick. You were part of a national championship team in 95. But I want to hear about your time with the legendary John Wooden. And I know he was a mentor of yours. Of course, John Wooden, for our younger audience, won 10 national championships in a 12-year period, 62 to 75, and had 88 straight wins in that time. But when we played UCLA in 83, I guess that was the year you were at Oral Roberts. We went out there and beat them. I went on that trip with Wimp and the team and went to Pauley Pavilion and sat behind our bench. And I looked about 7 or 8 rows behind me, and there's John Wooden. And I would have given anything if I'd had a cell phone back then. I would have gone and taken a photo, because he was so cordial and so nice to all the fans around him. They would come up and tell us about Coach Wooden, what he meant to you, and any John Wooden stories you may have.
He was the best, and Jim Herrick did a great job with us as coaches, to get around him. And the very first time I met him, he had turned 80 that year. I was a graduate assistant. And, when you get up in age, you have a birthday party, they all start coming back, and all the players, because, you don't know how long somebody's going to live. And I can remember walking into this room, and it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton, Marcus Johnson, Sidney Wicks. I mean, the lineup of players I had kind of grown up watching, and we're all in this room together. And there probably were 30 players, Gail Goodrich and Lucius Allen, Alt Hazard, and Dave Meyer.
Wow.
I mean, the list went on and on and on and on. And I just kind of remember being in like kind of awe a little bit, like, wow, this place, the level of player that they had. And then obviously with Coach Wooden, but, he was so generous, Tommy, like you said. And, I was so lucky that he was, anytime I called him and I said, Coach, hey, mind if I stop by your house? Every single time he said, absolutely, come on over. And there were many nights sit and watch TV and talk. And, we talked some X and O basketball stuff, but more than that, a lot of our conversation was about leadership or integrity or, things around the game. And he was so giving with that. And he was so generous. When we left UCLA, I can remember Brandon and Mary Lacey, my 2 oldest children at the time. They were 4 and 3. Elizabeth, my wife at the time, was pregnant with Cameron, so she was probably 7 months pregnant or so, and her belly was kind of big there. And Mary Lacey crawled up into John Wooden's lap, and we were sitting there, and he was Mary Lacey, and Mary Lacey started rubbing his tummy, and she looked right at him and said, "Is there a baby in there too, Coach?" He loved to tell that story. I tell you, there were so many times, my oldest son, Brandon, turned 18. We were living down in Orange Beach. We got on a plane and flew to L.A. and went to Coach Wooden's house for my son's 18th birthday.
Wow.
I mean, there were just so many times, but we sat and talked. And, I can remember one time I asked him about Bobby Knight. I said, Coach, what's your thoughts on Bobby Knight? And he looked right at me just as only he could. And he said, Mark, he said, I think he's a phenomenal basketball coach. I just don't approve of his methods. But he was great to be around. He was great. He was very reluctant to come to a practice, did not want to come to a practice. He came to 1 or 2, but came to every game. And then when we made it to Seattle for the national championship in 95, we convinced him to come to the game. And when he walked into the Kingdome in Seattle, for the championship game. It was us versus Arkansas. They were defending national champs. And when he walked in, it was as if it was almost like God just walked through the door. And he knew we're winning tonight. There's no doubt. But he was he's such a wise, Tommy, he's the wisest guy that I've ever been around. If you asked a question, he would tell you his answers were they were stories. And he would give you a lesson through a story. And he was just very, very, very wise. And so I learned a great deal from him. I always wanted to pattern myself as a coach, which is hard. Nobody can do that. But there were so many things you wanted to kind of replicate the way he did things.
Mark, your career continued with 3 years at Murray State, and then Mama called. Tell us about the process that you went through that led you back to Tuscaloosa.
Well, this will be a good one because I'm not sure if I ever told all these stories right here. So you got loser. So I was at Murray State. We had 3 really good years. And my last year at Murray State, our team was, I think we were 29-4. And we had a team that was good enough to make some noise in the tournament. We had beaten Arkansas in Puerto Rico. We'd beaten Iowa State. We went on the road and beat Dayton, who was really good. We rolled through the Ohio Valley Conference. And they were doing everything they could to keep me. And I don't know if you guys can remember, but, Alabama made a decision to let Coach Hobbs go, late in the season, but there was still basketball left. It was like mid-February. And I walked into practice at Murray State, and I can remember our gym was full of the Alabama media. The vans had made the trek up, the satellites, the guys with cameras, reporters. I had 6 Alabama kids on my team. And Alabama, Bob Bachrath was the AD, and he decided that he wanted to meet with me in Nashville. And so I drove to Nashville, and we met at this little FBO airport. And just quite honestly, I'm just going to call it like it is, and I don't mean to I'm not trying to be negative to Bob whatsoever, but he completely lowballed me, and I just was sick to my stomach. And the year before that, I had turned down both the Tennessee and the Georgia job after my second year at State, waiting for the Alabama job. And so I got in the car, and I just wanted to throw up. I wanted to get it. I was driving back to Murray ready to vomit. And I got home to Murray, and at that time, Kevin White was the athletic director at Arizona State, and they had made a change. And he was very honest with me. He said, Mark, I'm going to offer the job to Rick Majerus at Utah. I think we can get him. And as soon as they lose in the tournament, I'm going to offer him the job. If he doesn't take it, we're offering you the job, which I respected the honesty on that. And so I had told Bob, I said, Bob, I'm not coming, for what you're offering me. And, Bob wanted to fly me down. I said, there's no reason for me to fly down there. I know Alabama. I played there. I don't need to see anything. I know everything there is there. But it kind of turned I think over the next week or so, the guy that was instrumental in me coming to Alabama was Mal Moore. Mal was the assistant athletic director out in the office, and Mal said, Mark, don't turn this job down because of Bob. Just don't do that. This is where you belong. And Mal was he was so instrumental in kind of convincing me to kind of look past that and end up accepting the job there. And then we had a couple. That first year was okay. The second year we were better, and then we just started getting better and better, and it all worked itself out. And then Bob didn't last very long there, and then Mal became the athletic director. But Mal Moore was a key. He was the key for me because I was ready to turn it down. I was heartbroken. I wanted to be the coach at Alabama, and I think Bob at the time may have had his eyes on somebody else. Maybe he felt obligated to offer the job. I don't know. But, as it turned out, it all worked out well.
Yeah. Well, Mark, you may remember this. Tide Pride basketball was instituted for the 98-99 season, your first year. And we had called a meeting of all the basketball season ticket holders, the Tuscaloosa Tip-Off Club, everything. They're all pouring in there. There's hundreds there. And there's a microphone and a PA system set down on the court. Okay, they're sitting in sections B and C, which is behind where the visitors bench is now. And you spoke to them and welcomed them there and talked about how glad and proud you were to be there. And then you handed the microphone to me and said, and Tommy's going to tell you about the new Tide Pride program in basketball. I just felt like, get me out of this under the bus. I mean, you just like, okay, it's yours. I'm getting out of here. So we had instituted the football Tide Pride program 10 years earlier. And here we are doing the same thing for basketball. So I'm telling them about the Tide Pride basketball program, and all these questions are bouncing off on me, and you're sitting over there. You're standing in the portal there by Section B, but it turned out okay. And we did institute.
I knew my role in this situation. But tell me if this is correct, Tommy, because we're doing this. This will be good for us to do it even on the podcast. But Darren Boatwright, who later became the athletic director of Wichita State and was out. But when we put those seats on the floor that are still there, still there,
no question, yes,
still there. I can remember Bob Bockrath coming and saying, Mark, we're going to put these seats down, and you were very involved. It was you and I, Tommy, me and you, and Darren was my operations guy. And the fear was, a little bit of the concern was, we want to put these seats down on the court, put feet on the wood, right there. But we want to make sure they're people that are going to come to the games. We don't want those seats to be empty, just because somebody has enough money wasn't really the factor. And so between you, me, and Darren, pretty much, we kind of handpicked everybody that's sitting there this day. They're still sitting in those seats.
They're still in those seats. There's one in particular.
And that was Darren Boatwright, myself, and you, the three of us.
Yeah.
We picked who's going to sit where, and so everybody in that front row, they owe me a dinner somewhere along the line when I come back.
I remind one in particular of that every time I see him on Thursday lunch. I'm saying, how much of those Jack Nicholson seats going to cost you when the new arena's built?
That's right.
But they've been there a long time.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Boatwright, and I got to tell you the story about Boatwright and I driving down to Gulf Shores for our basketball coaches golf thing that Buddy Powell and Stanley Versiglio, put on. So Boatwright and I are driving down. He's driving. We get off I-10 late at night, go through Loxley, get pulled over by Loxley police. And the guy says, "You realize how much you're going?" Boatwright says, "I'm sorry, sir." Says, "I'm a basketball coach at the University of Alabama. We're just trying to get down. It's late and all that." He said, "Basketball coach, you work for Mark Gottfried?" He said, "Yes, I do." He said, "He's going to be coming right behind us. And you were at your dad's house in Mobile, and we're coming down a little bit after us." So he said, "You reckon I can get me a signed basketball?" Oh, yeah, we could find you a signed basketball. Boatwright called you. You had not left your day. He says, "Find me a basketball and meet me at the McDonald's at I-10 and 59. You remember this, but you hadn't heard it in a long time. So the policeman follows us back to the McDonald's at the I-10 59 intersection, and we wait on you. And you came out with a basketball and said, "Brother, how do I make it out?" So, Boatwright, I love it.
The good old days.
Oh, but listen, your first staff, Howard Pride, played at Vanderbilt. Darren Boatwright, Tom Kelsey, Philip Pearson, Ra Scott, loved Ra. Your first team included 2 JUCO transfers, Chris Rollins and Chauncey Jones, 5 true freshmen, Solomon Davis, Sam Hagenis, Jason Maravich, Cedric Patton, and Travis Sennett, 3 sophomores, Neil Ashby, Tariq London, and Doc Morton, 2 juniors, Alfred Moss and Jeremy Hayes, and 2 seniors, MC Mazik and Brian Williams. Your record, your first year, 17-15 with an NIT appearance. So I want you to talk about that first season, some of these guys, and also I'm intrigued by the whole Pete Maravich story and how he came in here in February of 1970 and scored 69 points against us. And we're going to do a podcast one day on that night. But Jason, his son, what was your connection to the Maravich family?
Well, they had a family friend who was a part of Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I'm going blank on his name right now. He's passed away, but that I had met years and years ago, and he was very close with Jason's mother and Pete's widow wife. And, he wasn't a great player, but they wanted to play Division I basketball in the worst way, and asked if I would bring him on as a walk-on. Certainly, I said, sure, I would love to have him. I'd never seen him play, and we brought him. But what was interesting, as we've kind of later learned in life, like when Michael Jordan had sons and other people, the media attention was so big. I remember Sports Illustrated calling saying, we want to do this story on Jason Maravich. And I'm like, well, I kind of think that's a little unfair to the kid, because he's not going to play. He's a walk-on player. And so that was a little delicate, to be quite honest. Great kid. The national media were starving for that. But, you kind of went back and rolled through that roster of that first year. I don't know how he won 17 games. Well, he did some smoke and mirrors with that group. No offense to the guys, I was saying, but that might have been my greatest coaching job of my whole career. But, it's interesting because, we found a way with Brian Williams, who was a good player, by the way.
Yeah.
And
really good.
Jeremy Hayes was a good, solid, big guy, and he just kind of hodgepodged it together. But that was the transition into what was to come.
So the next year, things were pretty much the same. Still hard. But the thing that happened in the 99-2000 season was really maybe more about the recruiting class that you brought in as freshmen that year. Terrence Mead, Todd Grizzard, Erwin Dudley, and Kenny Walker.
Yeah.
Tell us about that class.
It was a good class. I tell you what we did. Our philosophy was I wanted to be at Alabama for a long, long, long time. And so I wasn't looking for the quick fix. And what we did is we made a decision as a staff. I'm going to go sign the best players, and I'm going to play them. It's going to be my second year. We're going to take some lumps, but they're going to get a lot of experience. We joke about it later because, I've been back with Rod and Erwin and some of the guys. And, we were good enough. I think we upset Kentucky that year. They, I think, ranked maybe 5th or something in the country. But then we turn around and we get beat by 25 at Ole Miss. We were everywhere. We were up and down, and typical of playing a bunch of freshman players. But I think that by doing that, it gave those guys, I knew at some point they could become good enough, which they were then as juniors. And that's when, we won the SEC championship. But I don't think we would have won the SEC championship in 2002 if we wouldn't have done that, those years earlier. So all those guys got a ton of playing time. They took some lumps, but then they learned the hard way, and they all got better. Every one of them got better, and they all improved. And so that was a strategic decision we made. And then, I had and I tell people all the time, Robert Scott, if you had to go recruit a kid out of Washington, D.C. or somewhere, that's not your guy. But you draw a circle around Tuscaloosa about 200 miles, and you better get her sneakers up tight, because you weren't going to get a player in that circle if was going to recruit him. And probably, just one of the toughest, hardest, saddest, just broke my heart for all of us is, when Robert got sick. And if he wouldn't have gotten sick and would have stayed, healthy, and, obviously he passed, but we had a chance with Robert to really, I think, own, which we kind of did anyway, but really own the state. And I don't think anybody would have gotten a player out of the state of Alabama with myself and Robert together recruiting them. And so that was really a tough one for us when we lost Rob.
Yeah. Well, over the next few seasons, you really took off 25-11 in 2001. NIT 2002, 27-8. That's the famous Pettway layup to beat Florida, which is still shown as a highlight at our current University of Alabama home games. Regular season champs went to the tournament. 2003, 17-12. You reached number one in late December and then got beat by Utah and went back to the NCAA tournament. But we want to talk about the 3-4 team, 2003 and 4. Okay, at one point, y'all are 12-11 and nowhere near being an NCAA team. But you rallied, finished the regular season 16-12, split a couple of games in the SEC tournament. So you're 17-13, and because of an 8-8 record in the SEC, you made it to the dance. Take us through that magical run with wins over Southern Illinois and Stanford in Seattle, then a victory over Stanford in Phoenix, and then the loss to UConn, which was our first Elite Eight.
If you go back and think about the NIT year, which would have been the 01 year, I thought we should have been in the tournament. We were 21 or 22 wins. I think it came down to us in Georgia. And, we got kind of nationally grilled over our schedule. And it wasn't an intentional schedule. It wasn't like we were just padding victories. We just weren't really paying attention to the strength of schedule like we should have. We're playing a bunch of teams in December that ended up being not very good at all. So then from there forward, it was a strategic, kind of a conscious effort to say, we're going to play a tough schedule. We're going to play a good schedule. One, it's going to help us when the tournament time comes. But number two, it's probably going to make us better. It's going to make us a little bit more seasoned. And so we completely changed the schedule around. And that year in 04, we didn't have a glamorous record. And I can remember at one point in the year, I think you mentioned we were 12-11 or something it was. We weren't great. And I remember I took Mary Layson and Brandon, my two oldest kids. We went on a walk in the neighborhood, and I said, I want you two to just understand that Dad's he's going to start getting some heat here. So you're going to start saying some bad things about your dad pretty quick. So just get used to it. But we just kind of turned it and got going, and that team caught fire. By getting in the tournament and playing Southern Illinois, that game came down to the wire. Antoine Petway hit a little floater in the lane against Southern Illinois. And then in the Stanford game, Tommy, we were down 3 at the half, 39-36. We came out in the second half to start the second half, and we missed our first 17 shots. We could not make
it.
And I remember our guys came to the timeout. We called timeout, and I can remember this timeout like it was yesterday. I can remember telling our guys, we got two choices right now. One, hey, we can just take this one going home. Nobody's ashamed of you. We got the tournament. We're playing the best team in the country. Matter of fact, Stanford, they were 30-1. They were the one seed of the one seeds. So they were the best team in the country. Or, we can dig a little deeper right now. We got to find a way to get this thing done. They kind of rallied up, and it was an unbelievable second half against Stanford. And we were able to win that game. And then we went to Phoenix and played Syracuse. And Syracuse was defending national champs, but they didn't have Carmelo Anthony. He had gone to the NBA. They still had Hakeem Warwick and Jerry McNamara and some other guys. But we knew because of the way they played the zone defense, Pettway and Shelton and Emmett Thomas and Kennedy Winston, we just felt like there ain't no way they're going to zone us, which they did. And, we got them pretty good. And then the great story of that tournament was after the Syracuse game, you go back to the hotel, and you were probably there, Tommy, in Phoenix.
Yeah, I was.
And we had a little room down in the lobby there, off the lobby, and we could watch film in that room. We'd leave our VCRs and all that stuff back then in there. And Tom Asbury was one of my assistant coaches, and I walked in, and I said, Tom said, Mark, we'd already eaten, got a bite to eat, so now it's time to get ready and study. We're going to study this next team, UConn. And Tom said, you want the good news or the bad news? I said, give me the good news first. He said, the good news is we're in the Elite Eight. I said, that's great. I said, what's the bad news? He said, We got no shot.
And he was right.
And so I can remember we were at one point kind of playing halfway decent. Then I looked up and we were down by about 18. And I was like, it was hold on for dear life. But they went on and won the national championship. They were really, really good. But if we had played anybody else other than UConn, I thought we had a chance. But they were just so good that year. They were dominant.
Yeah, I have two funny stories from that trip. I did fly out there for the game. And, there's a day in between. After we beat Syracuse, had a day off and then played 2 days later. So Elliot Capoya, who was the travel guy, and Rhoda Vaughn, who was then the ticket manager, had taken my place, and Christy Dyer got in a rental car, and we drove about 3.5 hours north to the Grand Canyon. And we stayed, because I'd never seen the Grand Canyon before. But what was so cool, Elliot had a GPS in his car. I had never seen a GPS. I mean, this is 2004. I didn't even know what one was. And he had this big old GPS up on his car. And he said, watch this. So he would veer off the road on a side road and it would show. And I was like, I felt like Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies. I'm telling you. I was saying, wee doggy, look at that. And now we've got him on our watches. I mean, it's unbelievable. So that's one funny story. And then the next day at the game, somehow I get seated next to Pat Riley, who at the time, I can't remember if he was, I guess, with the Heat or the Lakers. I can't remember, but nicest guy in the world. Got to chat with Pat Riley. And he was there to see the game, So anyway, those are my two stories from that game. But you mentioned Shelton, Pettway, Kennedy Winston, Chuck Davis, Jamario Davison. Tell us about Pettway. And he could walk on 4 years, crowd favorite, the red shoes. I mean, unbelievable. And he stayed, like you said, been there a zillion years, and now the head coach at Kennesaw in Georgia. Tell us about Antoine.
Let me tell you the story here. So, Antoine's high school team won the state championship. His father, Joe, was the high school coach, and he was a 4.0 high school student. How about that? And so this was April after his senior year. So his senior year had ended. We were in need of a backup point guard, and I can't remember at the time who we had because Mo came the next year. But anyway, we set it up, called Joe, and Joe said, hey, I'll get the guys in the gym, play a little pickup game for you. So we watched him play, and we walked down the hall, went and sat in the library, and Antoine Petway was sitting on the edge of his seat. Now, you talk about he was leaning in. He could not wait for the word scholarship to come out of my mouth. And so he only had 2 scholarship offers from Alabama A&M and Alabama State. And I said, Antoine, I really liked how you played, and you're a good player, but I'd like you to come as a walk-on. And you would have thought I would have taken a pin and popped the bubble. Wow. That the air just left. It just left the room, and I crushed him. And I said, Antoine, I promise you, just take me on my word. If you come as a walk-on and prove it to me, I'll give you a scholarship. And so, a couple of weeks went by, and I think Joe was encouraging him to take the scholarship at Alabama A&M or Alabama State as his father. But he finally called and said, I want to come be a walk-on. And so he came, and we're about 3 or 4 games into the season. And I can remember looking over to my assistant coaches, and I said, you guys want to give Antoine a shot? Let's put him in. Let's give Antoine a little shot. I can't remember who we were playing. Well, Antoine goes in the game, steal, layup. Next thing you know, he hits a 3-pointer. I'm saying, whoa, okay. I said, I don't want to take him out. And so it kept going on. And as the season went on, I kept playing him more and more and more. And we got to the end of the year, and I called him in the office. I said, Antoine, you've earned it, and I want to give you a scholarship. And I'm telling you, to be honest, he about cried. I mean, he did. I about did too. It was such a great moment. Went home that night, and my phone rang, and it was Joe Pettway, his father. And Joe said, Coach, I just want to thank you, for believing in my son and giving my son a scholarship. He said, you didn't know this. He said, but last year I had to sell 2 cows so I could pay for his college tuition. So 2 cows. And And Antoine, I
Okay.
tell you, he was just that player that you just couldn't take him out of the game. You wanted him in there all the time. And this past fall here, just a couple months ago, his team from Kennesaw State, they played out here in Southern California. I went to the game, sat behind the bench, and boy, does he do a good job coaching. He is a natural. And so he's one of those guys that, as a coach, you couldn't be more proud of a guy that came as a walk-on, turned it into a scholarship, led his team to the Elite Eight. I mean, come on. I mean, it's like a movie.
Yeah.
But he's just one of the all-time greats.
Yeah. I know, my John Michael, my son, was about 5, 6, 7 years old during the time Antoine played. And man, he took John Michael under his wing. Anytime we were in the building, watching practice, he would do stuff with John Michael, and John Michael always loved those red shoes, that he was wearing.
And Tommy, if you think of, you'll remember, and I please forgive me here, Walt Gary.
Yeah, that's Walt Gary. You're right.
Mother and father they were the sweetest people on the planet.
Sure.
He, I think, was Down syndrome, and Antoine spent so much time with them, and it was genuine. Like, it was genuine for him. It wasn't like he was trying to do it for cameras or, somebody to write an article. He just had this big, genuine heart about himself. And that was a great example of kind of the person he is.
Coach, so much of your life has been about basketball. What would you say that basketball's meant to you?
Well, it's provided so much, the lessons I've learned, obviously financially it's provided me a great, living. And, I'm sitting here now, I just turned 61. I can't hardly say that out loud, but I did. I live in Newport Beach, California. And I'm still here.
You okay?
A little earthquake, must have got an earthquake in California. I think number one, financially it's been great, but the other part is what happens in sports, and this is sometimes where, your general fan doesn't, they don't always get it, and then nor should they, but the relationship build not only with your players, but then with your coaches, and then like with myself and Tommy, the memories that you build, the friendships that you create. I couldn't be more blessed. I had a great run at Alabama. I had a great run at NC State. I've been able to coach all over the country, but the players that I coached throughout the years, and some of them played in the NBA and a lot of them didn't, but it didn't matter. You still end up, watching these guys become men. Oh, and it's so great. Like when we've had Alabama's honored a couple of the teams, that I coached. And to see those guys now as they're older, they're married, they're fathers, they have children, they're doing well in life. It's just one of the great things for me. So I wouldn't have had it any other way. I've loved every part of it.
Well, one of those reunions was in January of 2017. We hosted a 30-year reunion of that great 86-87 team. You did not want to come. Okay, you did not want to come. Every teammate called you. Every teammate called you, and you said, "No, I ain't coming. I ain't coming." So, but you got one call from one particular person that changed your mind. Tell us that story.
Well, there was a few calls, but let me kind of preface that. So, when I left Alabama, and I had made a lot of mistakes. I had been going through a bad point in my marriage, and it's a water under the bridge, but. I was really just embarrassed. And I was embarrassed to be around. And what happens when, a school makes a decision to make a change, it's not everybody. It's usually one or two or three people that make that decision. But when you're on the other end of it, you're kind of mad at everybody. I'm just like, everybody, they must have taken a poll and decided to, whatever. And that's not true at all. And so, I'm coaching at NC State, and I think we played on a Tuesday, and we didn't play again until Saturday, and so they scheduled this on a Wednesday. Jim Farmer was the first one to call, I think, and say, "Mark, you coming?" I said, "I am not coming to that. I'm not stepping I'm not going to step my feet. I will not go back into Coleman Coliseum the rest of my life." And then Derek calls, Derek McKee calls. Then, it was one by one. They were all calling. I kept saying, I'm not coming. I'm just not coming. I said, I'm not coming. That you guys can have a good fun night, but I won't be there. And my dad was trying to tell me to come, Coach Eric, but then Wimp called me. And Wimp, at first when he called me, I think I told him at first, I'm not coming. He said, Mark, I understand more than anybody else out there. And because when I got the job at Alabama, I was wanting Wimp to come around. He was my coach, but it was still hard for him. Yeah, that was still hard at that time. And, finally, I had a hard time telling Coach Sanderson no. But I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I came. Matter of fact, I had a guy, one of our boosters at NC State, I called him and he had a plane, and I would have normally never done this because it wasn't for NC State, but I said, it's a personal situation. I said, would you fly me to Tuscaloosa? Here's the deal. I said, we're going to get there right before half. I'm going to walk out at halftime, and halftime I'm walking right back out and getting on the plane, and I'm out of there. I don't want to be in that gym more than 20 minutes. And it ended up being a great, great night, and I'm so thankful I did it because it's not the people at Alabama. And Tommy, I look back and my relationship with Mal Moore was so good. I tell people this story all the time, and you've heard this, Tommy, but I'll share this with everybody who listens. After Mal and then made the decision, which I gave him I tell people I put the bullets in the gun, some of my own personal decisions that I was doing in my life. So it wasn't anybody's fault but my own. But even when Mal made that decision and he called me in his office, he paid me for 27 more months. I had 28 months left on my contract. I got 27 more months until I took the job at NC State. He called on me probably once every 3 or 4 months. Mal Moore would call me and ask me how I was doing, how Elizabeth, how about my kids. And as a matter of fact, get emotional here when I tell this story, but when Mal got sick and they had flown him to Duke Hospital, I was at NC State, so I'm 15 miles away from Duke Memorial, and I drove over one morning, and his daughter was in the room, and Mal had the oxygen mask. He'd kind of have to take it off to talk, and then he'd put the oxygen back on, and he was telling me about the plan that he, to get him back on his feet, and they were going to rent a furnished apartment, and they were going to exercise, and because they had to build his heart up before he could have that transplant. And I apologized to him and told him that, I feel, bad if I ever put him in a bad situation. And we cried together. We laughed together. And so it was, and then he passed 2 days later, 2 days after I was there. I think I was there on a Wednesday, I think it was. And I think it was Friday that he passed, if I have that right. But anyway, Mal Moore was the best athletic director, the best administrator that I ever had the chance to work for. And I worked at, 5 different schools, university, and nobody had as big of a heart as Mal Moore, period. Story. So he was a good one.
So Mark, before we close, one of the things I've taught leadership at the undergraduate level, I've taught at the graduate level, been a student of leadership practically my whole adult life. And I'm so excited about what you're doing now. And the thing that you, the way that you're pouring into leaders. Tell folks a little bit about what you're doing now and just how you're pouring into leaders.
Well, it's 2 ways. Thank you for asking that question. One, I have a podcast, which is a lot of fun. I want to get high achieving people that, are fun, but just high achievers to tell their story. Because I think we sometimes we see somebody with that's having great success, and we don't realize that they've had along the way all of the tough times and the obstacles and the setbacks. And so it's wonderful to kind of pull that out of people. But then, the other thing that I've really enjoyed doing is I'm doing a lot of corporate speaking now to different corporations around the country, teams. And, it's interesting because when I was very young, I was told one time, Mark, don't ever pursue profit, always pursue passion. And I think for the majority of my career, I always pursued passion. I never took a job for the money, except at the very end when I was working for the Mavs and I went out to Cal State Northridge. I'd gone through a divorce. I was paying alimony, and I took a job basically because of what they pay. But this endeavor to speak, even though getting paid is nice, it's not about the money for me. It's about the opportunity to hopefully inspire people and to wake them up. So many times people fall into complacency. They become mediocre. It's easy to fall into a mundane routine with things. And so if I can help somebody or help an organization or help a person kind of reawaken that drive inside of them, it's really rewarding for me. So I'm having a blast with it, and people can find me on my website, coachmarkgottfried.com. But anyway, it's been a lot of fun. I've had some opportunities around the country. I was in Nashville a couple months ago. I'm going down to Fort Lauderdale here in a couple weeks to speak, but those are a lot of fun for me. Thank you for asking about that.
Absolutely. We want to make sure folks find you on YouTube and anywhere that you can find podcasts. You'll find the Mark Gottfried Show, and we want you guys to check that out if you haven't. It's an incredible podcast, and the things that you're going to learn, the little nuggets that come through in leadership are profound. So, man, we really are grateful that you're doing that, and it's adding a lot to the conversation.
Thank you.
And we've had an incredible conversation, but it's time to be done, right, Seth?
Well, here's the thing. Tommy and I, we could turn this camera off. We could tell all kinds of stories for nothing.
Yeah, there's one in particular. Yeah,
there's as much as I'd love to take bribes at this point to be able to get that story and share it. I'm sure that's probably not the right thing to do.
I'm going to start what do they call them, GoFundMe or something, where we raise money because Tommy needs one tire. He just needs one tire on his car. We can have people kind of figure out what the story is, but he needs one tire.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Well, we will. Tommy, are you speechless?
No, Mark came back for another reunion, and we were over at the Bryant Museum, and I met his fiance, now his wife, over there, and he said, "Tell her about that story." So anyway, he just could not. She couldn't believe it. So anyway, it's a funny story. Anybody watching, I'll tell you the story.
Yeah.
The names have been changed to protect the guilty.
Well, folks, as much as we want to tell that story, we're not going to tell it here. So you're going to have to catch one of them somewhere and twist their arm to tell it. But we are going to say thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you joining us on the Crimson Chronicles podcast. We're having a ball being able to go through history and tell these stories. And Mark Gottfried, we've had such a good time with you. And so thanks for taking your time and sharing some memories with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Folks, we appreciate you listening, and we'll be right back here next time. So join us again next week. Downloads on Tuesday. We'll be here for the Crimson Chronicles podcast.